Welcome to the What Does Science Say channel. Welcome to a new deep dive. Today, we're getting into something that's, well, pretty much everyone experiences, right? Flatulence.
That's right. Farting, basically.
Exactly. It often ends up as a joke or maybe something kind of embarrassing, but if you actually look into it, there's some genuinely fascinating science there, and history, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things everyone knows about, but the details underneath are surprisingly complex. We've gathered quite a bit of source material, research bits, articles, some really interesting facts to kind of map this out.
Yeah, so our mission for this deep dive is to maybe get past the giggles. We want to pull out the most
That's fair.
important, the most surprising, and maybe even some weird bits of knowledge from all this stuff we've collected. Really understand why we do it, what it's made of.
And what it might even tell us.
Right. What it says about our bodies.
Exactly. We'll look at the fundamental reasons, what's actually in the gas, what influences it, diet, health, things like that. And yeah, some really unexpected historical angles too. It goes way back.
Okay, let's get into it then. The most basic question first. Why do we actually fart? The sources seem to point to two main reasons.
That's right. It's a totally normal part of digestion. And yeah, two main drivers. First, there's the air we swallow.
So,
Yeah, every time you eat, drink, even just swallowing saliva, you gulp down a little bit of air. It goes down into your digestive tract.
okay. And it doesn't come back up like as a burp.
Then it keeps going down and has to come out the other end eventually.
So even just talking while eating could add to it.
It could, yeah. And the second big source, often the more significant one, is the gas that's actually produced inside your gut.
Right, the bacteria doing their thing.
Exactly that, our gut microbiome. As food moves into the colon, especially the stuff we can't easily digest ourselves, think complex carbs, fiber.
Like beans and broccoli.
Those are classic examples, yeah. The trillions of microbes living there start breaking it down. They ferment it. And that fermentation process, it releases various gases as byproducts.
Like a tiny internal gas factory.
Sort of, yeah. And as those gases build up, the pressure increases, and the body needs a way to let it out.
Okay, makes sense. Swallowed air plus bacterial byproducts. So what are these gases actually made of? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it all the smelly stuff?
Well, no, actually, that was one of the surprising things in the sources. The vast, vast majority of fart gas, maybe like 3/4 of the volume or even more, is made up of gases that have absolutely no smell.
No smell at all. So most of the time it doesn't actually stink.
That seems to be the case based on the research.
Yes.
The biggest components are nitrogen and oxygen, mostly from that swallowed air,
Right.
And then hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and methane. Those are mainly from the bacterial fermentation. All colorless, all odorless.
But hang on. We all know they can smell sometimes really badly. What causes that smell then?
Ah, okay, so that's where the really tiny components come in. We're talking less than 1% of the total volume, typically. But that tiny fraction is responsible for the smell.
Just 1%.
Yep. And these are mostly volatile sulfur compounds.
Sulfur. Like rotten egg.
That's the main one, hydrogen sulfide. It's a big contributor to that characteristic rotten egg or sewage smell.
Mm.
But there are others too, like methanethiol, which can be more like rotten cabbage.
Oh, lovely.
Or dimethyl sulfide, which might have a sort of garlicky note.
So it's this minuscule amount of really potent sulfur stuff that makes all the difference. It's not about how much gas there is, but what's in that tiny little bit.
Precisely. And the exact mix of those smelly compounds, that can change quite a bit depending on, say, what you've eaten and which specific types of bacteria you have living in your gut. One source even mentioned finding things like pine and lemon in samples.
Like pine trees and lemons?
Yeah, linked to those kinds of scents.
Pine fresh farts. I'm finding that hard to believe based on general life experience.
Well, yeah. While those compounds might technically be there sometimes, the sources suggest the sulfur compounds are just so potent, they tend to overwhelm everything else, even in tiny amounts. So sadly, the pungent smells usually win out. Probably no commercial air freshener tie-ins anytime soon.
Right. A missed marketing opportunity. Okay, let's shift to numbers. How much is considered, normal?
The sources give a bit of a range. For a healthy person, passing gas somewhere between, say, 10 and 20 times a day is pretty standard.
10 to 20. Okay.
Though some sources mention it could be as high as 40 times a day for some individuals.
40 times. Wow. A lot of those must be pretty small then, right? And like you said, probably odorless if we don't notice them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're often released in small amounts. The total volume of gas let out each day also varies a lot, but studies have measured averages around 700 milliliters. The range, though, can go from about half a liter up to maybe 2 liters a day.
2 liters. That sounds like a huge amount.
It does, yeah. Spread out, of course. And what about speed? There's that common idea about how fast they travel. Oh, yeah.
Apparently, yes. One source cited an NBC News report saying that when released, they can travel surprisingly fast, maybe up to 10 feet per second.
10 feet per second? That's what, like almost 7 miles an hour?
Roughly, yeah. Faster than a brisk walk.
Okay, now here's a really interesting bit. The whole men versus women thing. You always hear that men fart more. Does the science back that up?
Ah, yes, the classic debate. The sources we looked at gave a kind of nuanced picture here. One article mentioned a study suggesting women's farts might actually smell worse because they can have a higher concentration of hydrogen sulfide,
Oh, really?
while men in that study tended to pass a larger volume of gas overall. But then other sources flat out said that studies have found men and women expel basically the same total amount of gas. So some research labels the idea that women fart more or less as a myth.
So it's a bit conflicting on the total amount or how often, but maybe there's a difference in the composition that changes how we perceive the smell. That seems to be the fair summary of the material, yeah. Some studies find similar frequency or total volume. Others find differences in volume per fart, or specifically in those sulfur compounds. One study did find significantly higher hydrogen sulfide in women's samples, leading to a more intense odor, even if the volume wasn't bigger. It kind of shows how perception and reality might not perfectly line up.
That's fascinating, that little detail.
Yeah.
Okay, what about age? Do older people fart more?
One source tackled this directly. It said studies show no significant difference in the amount or frequency between younger and older folks.
So we're all in it together throughout life.
Seems like it. It's an equal opportunity function.
Good to know. What about pregnancy? I feel like I've heard that can definitely change things.
Yes, that's definitely noted as a factor. Flatulence does tend to increase during pregnancy.
Why is that?
The sources point mainly to hormones, especially progesterone. Higher levels can slow down the muscles in the digestive tract.
Ah, so things move slower.
Exactly. And that slower transit time gives the gut bacteria more time to ferment food and produce gas. Plus, changes in muscle control and just the physical pressure from the growing uterus can make it harder to hold gas in sometimes.
Right, so hormones and just the physical reality combined.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, beyond things like pregnancy, what are the biggest factors influencing how much gas we make or how potent it is?
Diet is probably the single biggest one. Foods that are harder to fully break down in the small intestine, they basically provide more fuel for those gas-producing bacteria down in the colon.
So high-fiber foods.
High-fiber foods are common culprits, yeah,
Yeah.
but often in a good way for gut health. Things like beans, lentils, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, those cruciferous veggies, they're great for you, but they definitely feed the fermentation process.
Because our own enzymes can't break down those fibers, but the bacteria can.
Exactly, that fermentation is the key. But other foods can contribute too, especially for certain people, like lactose intolerance is a big one. If you can't break down milk sugar properly, the bacteria have a field day with it, causing a lot of gas and discomfort.
Right.
Artificial sweeteners like sorbitol can do it. Some grains like oats and wheat. Even things like onions and garlic can increase gas for some people. And for the smell. Foods high in sulfur, those cruciferous veggies again, or certain compounds in meats and dairy that can lead to, well, smellier results.
So that really healthy diet packed with plants, it might actually make you gassier, maybe even smellier, precisely because you're feeding all those good gut bacteria.
That's what one study specifically suggested, yes. It found men on a plant-based diet farted way more often, like 7 times more per day on average compared to when they were eating a more typical Western diet.
7 times more.
Yeah, and each time the volume was about 50% larger too. And this was directly linked to promoting the activity of those healthy, fiber-loving bacteria.
Wow, that completely flips the perspective, doesn't it? Something we usually think of as negative, more farting could actually be a good sign. A sign of a healthy gut working hard, especially with a plant-rich diet.
Exactly. One source explicitly said the idea that farting more means something is wrong is usually totally false, especially if it's linked to eating lots of plant foods. It's actually a strong indicator of a healthy diet and a healthy colon, because you're feeding the good guys.
That's a really important takeaway. It might mean your body's doing exactly what it's supposed to.
Oh.
Okay, we talked about swallowing air when eating. Are there other ways we swallow too much air?
Definitely. Swallowing excess air, the term is aerophagia, can increase gas. Things like chewing gum a lot, drinking fizzy drinks, eating or drinking really fast,
Okay.
or even just unconsciously swallowing air if you're anxious. That can all add up. Oh, and the sources also mention altitude changes, like flying.
Ah, because the cabin pressure is lower, so the gas inside you expands.
That's the physics of it, yeah. The gas takes up more space at lower pressure. That leads to that bloated feeling and, well, needing to release the pressure more often.
Physics causing personal discomfort. Okay, what about when it feels like too much? Like it's painful or just constant?
Yeah.
When does normal cross into maybe being a problem?
Right. While normal farting is healthy, the sources are clear. If it's persistent, excessive, painful, or consistently very foul smelling, especially if you have other symptoms like bloating, abdominal pain, changes in bowel habits, maybe unintended weight loss that could signal an underlying issue.
Like what?
They mention things like constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, celiac disease, or those food intolerances we talked about, like lactose intolerance.
And certain medications can play a role too, can't they?
Yes, that's a really key point from the sources. Several types of meds can cause excess wind or changes in smell as a side effect. Things like NSAIDs, common painkillers like ibuprofen, some laxatives, antifungal drugs, and statins, the cholesterol meds.
That's really important to know. If someone notices a change and they're on medication, that's definitely something to bring up with their doctor.
Absolutely. The sources strongly advise talking to a healthcare professional if you're concerned. And definitely don't just self-diagnose or stop taking prescribed medicine without talking to them first. They also pointed out that people with functional bowel disorders like IBS can be much more sensitive to gas. They might feel more pain and bloating even if they aren't actually producing more gas than someone else.
Ah, so it's not just the amount, but how your body reacts to it. Okay, speaking of control,
hmm
can you actually hold them in successfully?
Well, you can certainly try, by clenching muscles. But according to the sources, the gas doesn't just disappear, it'll find its way out eventually. Often, if you hold it in all day, it tends to get released once your muscles relax, like when you're asleep.
So they sneak out while you're totally unaware.
That seems to be a common scenario, yeah. Muscles relax during sleep. Trapped gas can move more easily, so people might pass gas more at night without even realizing it.
And this is a slightly weird point from the sources. Something about flatulence after death.
It sounds odd, but yeah, it's a documented thing. For a short period after death, maybe up to about 3 hours, before rigor mortis fully sets in, muscles can still have some residual contraction and expansion. If there's gas trapped in the digestive tract, maybe from decomposition starting, these little muscle movements can push it out.
Wow.
It can result in sounds that might resemble burping or, well, farting, a sort of final unavoidable release, it seems.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
And a bit unsettling. Okay, let's move away from the morbid. History and culture, surely people haven't always been as embarrassed about this as many are today.
Not at all. The sources showed a really long and varied history here. For instance, guess what one of the oldest recorded jokes in human history is?
Oh no, don't tell me.
An ancient Sumerian fart joke.
You're kidding. What was it?
It's a proverb, apparently, found on a tablet from around 1900 BC. It translates roughly to something like, something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap.
A joke about a wife farting on her husband from nearly 4,000 years ago. That really does highlight how universal this is.
Doesn't it, Jess? And even big names like Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, apparently believed holding farts in was bad for your health. He recommended just letting them pass. So there was definitely a time when it was seen as important for keeping the body in balance.
So maybe more practical or even necessary rather than just embarrassing.
Attitudes have definitely swung back and forth wildly across time and different cultures. What's seen as super offensive in one society might be funny or just ignored in another. It really suggests the social stigma is mostly a cultural thing, not something inherently biological.
That's a really good point. The embarrassment is often learned. And speaking of embarrassment, there was an interesting bit about how we react to our own versus others.
Yes, one source mentioned that. People are generally less bothered by the smell of their own farts compared to someone else's.
Why is that?
Probably just familiarity. You get used to your own unique blend of bodily odors over time. You build up a tolerance, sort of.
You get accustomed to your personal air quality.
Basically, yeah. The sources also dug up some more obscure facts. Did you know there are actually scientists who specialize in studying flatulence?
A professional. Fart researcher.
A flatologist, according to one source. They mentioned a gastroenterologist named Michael Levitt who did pioneering work figuring out the composition and volume of intestinal gas. Apparently, he even collected samples from himself for his research. Now, that's
That
dedication.
really is commitment. Okay, what about flammability? That old party trick or urban legend
The sources confirmed it. Yes, farts can be flammable.
because of the hydrogen and methane.
Exactly, those combustible gases. But, and this is important, they also strongly warn against ever trying to light one. Seriously dangerous risk of burns. Definitely not something to try at home or anywhere.
Right, safety first. Got it. Any other really surprising or weird facts that came up?
There was a mention of a type of insect, the beaded lacewing larva, that might use some kind of expelled gas to stun termites, its prey, though the source wasn't totally sure if it's a true fart or some other chemical thing.
Insects fart too.
Oh, yeah. Termites especially are apparently huge gas producers. They release significant amounts of methane.
Tiny bugs, big impacts.
Potentially, yeah. Globally, termites are estimated to produce millions of tons of methane each year. It contributes to greenhouse gases, though still less than, say, livestock. It just shows how even something seemingly small connects to bigger ecological cycles.
It's really amazing how digging into this one bodily function connects ancient jokes to climate science.
It really is. And understanding the composition and what influences it isn't just, trivia. Scientists are actually looking into ways to use the volatile compounds released from our bodies from waste, including presumably the gases, as potential diagnostic tools.
How-
They're developing things like electronic noses to analyze these chemical signatures. They're looking for patterns that might indicate conditions like IBS, or maybe even help screen for things like colon cancer down the line. Though the sources noted it's still pretty early days, and collecting the samples can be, well, practically challenging.
A literal pain in the rear end for the researchers, as one source put it.
Exactly. But it shows the potential. Even studying something seemingly embarrassing could lead to really valuable health insights.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what does all this mean for you listening right now?
Well, it means that farting is completely normal. It's universal, it's biological. How often, how much, how it smells, that's all influenced by lots of things. Your diet, swallowed air, your unique gut bacteria, sometimes health conditions. And remember, most of the gas doesn't even smell. The odor comes from those tiny amounts of sulfur compounds.
And maybe the biggest takeaway, farting more, especially if you're eating a lot of fiber and plants, can actually be a good sign. It can mean you have a really healthy, active gut microbiome doing its job. We also covered some surprising stuff, the oldest joke being about farting, the speed, the flammability.
Don't test that one.
Right, definitely don't test that. And yes, there are actual flatologists studying this stuff.
It just reminds us our bodies are incredibly complex and fascinating. Even the most everyday functions have deep science, long histories, and really varied cultural takes.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on based on the sources. Given that it's universal, biologically necessary, and has this surprisingly rich history, why does flatulence still carry such a heavy social stigma in so many cultures today? What might our collective reaction to this completely natural process say about us? Or maybe flip it around. Consider that something you might feel embarrassed about could actually be a positive signal that your body, especially your gut microbiome, is working exactly the way it should because of the healthy foods you're eating.
Thank you for being with us until the end of this video. Please be sure to subscribe to the What Does Science Say channel and give us energy with your likes and comments. Share your comments with us and send the video to your loved ones that others can also use it.